I want to talk about how the Colts have developed Anthony Richardson up to this point. And really, I'm going to take kind of a two-pronged approach, right? I'm going to talk about one, what I view the roles of each of the parties to be, right? Like, what's the coaching staff's role? What's the organization's role? And then what is the player's role, specifically Anthony Richardson in this case? And then from there, I'll kind of touch on, okay, how have each of them fulfilled their roles in his development up to this point? And from there, we'll kind of try to get a clearer picture as to what it is that we might be looking at. And ultimately, we don't exactly know, right? Like, we could just take our best guess. But what I'm doing right now is hopefully trying to set us up to take that best guess, to take the most educated guess possible. So let's start from a coaching standpoint. And really, I guess Shane Steichen would be the figurehead here, right? Of course, when it comes to coaching a guy and developing him, you have the stuff like practice and the film session and making sure all that stuff is set up well, right? And that's one side of it. But on the offensive side of the ball, really the big one for Shane Steichen and the Indianapolis Colts, when you're thinking about what they had to do to develop Anthony Richardson, were you putting him in a position to succeed from a play calling standpoint? Like on game day, were you calling plays that were tailored to a guy's strengths? When you talk about the idea of reps being needed for a quarterback, a lot of that is reps being needed within the offense. And is that offense suited for that guy's strengths? Building that is a large part of what it means for a coaching staff to develop a quarterback. On the organizational standpoint, Chris Ballard's taken all of this. Did you surround him with enough foundational pieces and personnel that you would need to execute, right? On the offensive side of the ball, do you have a strong offensive line? Do you have weapons for the guy to throw to, right? And then finally, from Anthony Richardson's perspective, did you do everything? Excuse me. Let me take a sip of water while we're at it, right? Let me catch you right in the middle of the video. Anthony Richardson, did you do everything outside of the building beyond what was asked of you in the building, right? So much of being a great player in this league is the extra work, right? This is the type of job in the NFL that if you just show up to practice and do that and nothing else, I mean, that's not enough. You got to take this one home with you, and that's part of what it is. So let's rewind this thing back once more, and let's start with the coaching side of it. And what did I say? Play calls, right? From a play calling perspective, were you getting it done? Well, I think Shane Steichen, personally, a very, very good play caller, right? Not perfect. Of course, there's always going to be moments, particularly with these offensive guys. They get cute sometimes. But ultimately, you think about what this offense has been able to achieve with subpar quarterback play since he's been here. You're talking about a team that's essentially 500 under Steichen with, again, Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson. They were top 10 in scoring in 2023 with Gardner Minshew, and then middle of the pack in the league in scoring in 2024 with a quarterback in Richardson who couldn't move the sticks. The easiest piece of evidence statistically for that would be the time of possession for the Indianapolis Colts last year, which they ranked in the bottom 3. Of course, the completion percentage for Anthony Richardson was sub 50%, which was putrid. Now, of course, your eyes could have easily done the trick, right? The Colts offense with Anthony Richardson last year was anemic for large stretches during the season. But nonetheless, from a play calling perspective, I would say ultimately, I think Steichen has done, he's tailored this offense to Richardson. I mean, a lot of work out of the shotgun, a lot of read options, a lot of design quarterback runs. I mean, you can't really do much else to try to put Richardson in a position to succeed. You call plays, guys get open, someone has to hit a throw, right? 2, organizationally, Chris Ballard. Was the offensive personnel strong for Richardson? Well, for me personally, I would have to say, yeah, I would. Say all you want about Chris Ballard and his roster building. You look right now at the offensive line. That's a well above average offensive line. You've got weapons out the ass in Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. and now Tyler Warren. Of course, you have Josh Downs and Adonai Mitchell and Alec Pierce. I mean, that's a whole lot to have on the offensive side of the ball for anyone. It's a supporting cast that a lot of quarterbacks really wish they had, right? When you talk about it holistically, not just in terms of the skill positions, but again, that offensive side of the ball, the offensive line rather, right? I personally feel everything was there for this offense to at least be more efficient than it was last year, right? It's not to say that, it was like a perfect thing and you had all of this top end talent. But if you're talking about an efficient offense, I thought from a play calling perspective and a personnel perspective on the offensive side of the ball, with Anthony Richardson, the Colts really had what he would have needed, right? Like very little excuse for Anthony Richardson on that front if you're looking at it objectively. And then, of course, there's Richardson's side of it, which is where I think a lot of fans are starting to blur the line between, Richardson's shortcomings and Shane Steichen's shortcomings, right? Richardson is a guy who played 13 games in college, okay? And there were questions about whether or not he was going above and beyond last season in terms of the work that he was putting in, right? So, with that said, I'll be fair to Richardson. This year, it seemed like he was putting in all of that work and then some. But when you couple really the lack of experience, not just in college, but overall as a quarterback, you have to think, man, to play 13 games in college and even less than that in high school as a quarterback and then be one of the 32 starters in the NFL, I mean, that's a tall task to begin with. But you couple that with the fact that maybe you weren't doing everything you possibly could to become the greatest quarterback you can possibly be. And you add those two things up and you end up in a spot where, from a football perspective, and I know so many of you guys are going to hate to hear this, you have a guy who's way behind in terms of his readiness to lead an offense, and it becomes a question. Well, all right, you haven't played a whole lot of quarterback, and you weren't exactly working like Tom Brady. Is that just too much for a guy to overcome, right? Like whatever distance you lost, like however you fell behind between those two things, between your rookie year and your second year, plus, of course, the injuries, like just how much can you expect a guy in Richardson's spot to overcome, coaching aside? And I think Shane Steichen right now is looking and saying, I am tired of my credibility as a play caller, as an offensive mind, being called into question because of a guy who ultimately is really in no position to get it done, right? Is in no position to get it done when you think about all the ingredients that I just listed, particularly when my job in Shane Steichen is on the line. Now, that's not to say Steichen deserves no heat at all. Like, I think you have to look at the drafting of Anthony Richardson. I mean, again, I just said what I said in terms of how many games he played at quarterback. In the top 5 to draft a guy who really, I mean, a lot of these dudes have been playing quarterback since they're 10, 12 years old. I mean, to draft a guy in the top 5 who was never really considered all that accurate, didn't do a whole lot of winning at any level, and has limited snaps at quarterback, I mean, there's a level of arrogance, quite frankly, that it takes from Steichen and Ballard to draft that guy there and then sell him to the fan base as the second coming of whoever, right? I mean, there's a level of arrogance there that cannot go really without being pointed out. Like, that's just the truth of the matter. That being said, though, I do look at that draft. Keep in mind, right? I had Anthony Richardson as the 6th. That's right, 6th quarterback in that draft. For the record, I had C.J. Stroud as an easy number 1. I had Tanner McKee, who ended up being a 6th-round pick for the Philadelphia Eagles, who I said the Colts should trade for coming into the season. They should still trade for him now. I had him as the 2nd-best quarterback in that draft. That, to this point, is true. C.J. Stroud and Tanner McKee are the 2 most productive, Bryce Young pending. And then I had guys like, who else? I had Will Levis and Bryce Young at 3 and 4. And then I had Hendon Hooker even I had ahead of Anthony Richardson. Point being is that Anthony Richardson at number 6 in this draft. So that does kind of display where I stand. But my point in bringing all this up is this idea of Shane Steichen regressing as a play caller, which doesn't even exist. Yeah, how could you possibly regress as a play caller? If you have all this knowledge, this is not a physical battle, right? It's one thing for a player to regress because physically you lose the skill, right? You lose the edge you once had. But for a play caller to regress, that is a fallacy. That doesn't even exist. This idea of him regressing as a play caller, not being able to develop a quarterback, do not confuse. I'm not saying that there's no merit to any of it at all. But at the same time, what I am saying is don't confuse Anthony Richardson's inability to play NFL quarterback with Shane Steichen's ability or lack thereof to coach an offense, right? Those two things are not the same. And I think part of the reason you see this decision from Shane Steichen to go with Daniel Jones is I think he wants to stick it up the ass of everyone saying that it's on him. He's saying, no, we're not going to let AR off the hook, and I'm going to show you what I can do with a guy in Daniel Jones who nobody believes in. That's ultimately what I think we're seeing right now, and we're going to see if it works out, right? Whether or not it works, whether or not it's likely to work is entirely separate from the point.